A wolf finds a baby abandoned in a cardboard box and takes it to the forest. What it does next will shock you. The sun was beginning to set behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in hues of copper and violet that reflected off the windows of Sunrise Ranch. Emily Morgan, a 28-year-old woman with hazel eyes and chestnut hair pulled back in a messy braid, walked among the fields of her property, inspecting the fences with the meticulousness she had inherited from her father. The ranch, a testament to generations of hard work and dedication, stretched across several acres of fertile land. Emily had inherited it 3 years ago when her parents decided to move to the city to enjoy a quieter life. Since then, she had proven that the entrepreneurial spirit and connection to the land ran in her veins. "Martha," Emily called out to her housekeeper, a middle-aged woman who had worked on the ranch since before she was born. "Did you check the supplies that arrived this morning?" "Yes, ma'am," Martha replied, approaching with a worn notebook in her hands. "Everything's in order, although..." The woman hesitated for a moment before continuing. "The tracks have been seen again near the northern border." Emily sighed, running a hand across her forehead. Stories about the grey wolf prowling the area had become a topic of conversation in town. Some described it as a huge beast. Others swore its eyes shone with an almost human intelligence. Emily, however, maintained a pragmatic stance on the matter. "As long as it doesn't get close to the cattle, there's nothing to worry about," she replied, although a part of her was curious about the creature that had chosen the surroundings of her ranch as its territory. Night began to fall over the property, bringing with it a cool breeze that rustled the leaves of the century-old trees surrounding the main house. Emily was in her office reviewing the accounting books when a peculiar sound cut through the night air. A howl, different from any she had heard before. Something about that sound made her shiver. It wasn't the threatening howl of a predator, but rather a call, a plea that resonated in the darkness. Emily approached the window, peering into the night. The full moon illuminated the landscape with its silver light, revealing the silhouettes of trees and the dancing shadows they cast. The howl repeated, closer this time. Emily felt her heart racing. Without thinking twice, she grabbed her flashlight and jacket from the coat rack. Martha, who appeared in the office doorway, looked at her with concern. "Ma'am, you're not thinking of going out at this hour," the woman said, crossing herself. "Full moon nights bring their own mysteries." Emily gave her a reassuring smile. "I'm just going to check that everything's in order, Martha. I won't be long." But as she walked towards the front door, Emily felt that something extraordinary was about to happen. The night air seemed charged with a special energy, as if fate had chosen this precise moment to reveal one of its best-kept secrets. As she opened the door, the cold night wind greeted her like an omen. In the distance, between the trees that marked the beginning of the forest, two golden eyes shone in the darkness. The wolf had appeared, and with it the beginning of a story that would forever change life at Sunrise Ranch. Emily's footsteps echoed softly on the damp earth as she ventured into the darkness, guided only by the beam of her flashlight and that inexplicable feeling that pushed her forward. The wolf, majestic in its stillness, remained motionless among the shadows of the trees, its golden eyes fixed on her. "What do you want to show me?" Emily whispered, surprising herself by speaking to a wild animal as if it could understand her. To her amazement, the wolf responded to her voice by slightly tilting its head before turning and beginning to walk, stopping every few steps to make sure she was following. Emily's heart was pounding as they ventured deeper into the forest. Moonlight filtered through the tree branches, creating silver patterns on the forest floor. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the silence was almost absolute, broken only by the soft crunch of leaves under her feet. Suddenly, the wolf stopped in a small clearing. Emily held her breath as her flashlight illuminated a cardboard box partially covered by leaves. A faint sound, barely perceptible, emerged from inside. The cry of a baby. "Oh my God!" Emily exclaimed, running towards the box. The wolf stayed close, watching her every move attentively. Inside the box, wrapped in worn blankets, a baby no more than 3 months old was shivering from the cold. Its cheeks were flushed from crying, but its eyes, large and dark, fixed on Emily with an intensity that tugged at her heart. "How is this possible?" she murmured, taking the little one in her arms and cradling it against her chest. The baby calmed almost instantly, clinging to the warmth of her body. Emily looked at the wolf, which had sat on its haunches and was observing her with what seemed to be satisfaction. You found it, but you've been protecting it." The animal emitted a soft growl, as if confirming her words. Emily then noticed the details. The leaves carefully placed around the box to protect it from moisture. The blankets arranged so that the baby wouldn't roll. The wolf had been caring for the creature until it could lead someone to it. "We need to take it to a safe place," Emily said, taking off her jacket to better wrap the baby. The wolf immediately stood up, ready to guide her back. As they walked towards the ranch, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the extraordinary situation she found herself in. Who had abandoned this baby in the middle of the forest? Why? Upon reaching the property limits, Martha was waiting on the porch, wringing her hands with worry. Her expression changed from relief to astonishment when she saw Emily emerging from the darkness with a bundle in her arms, followed by the imposing grey wolf. "Holy Virgin!" exclaimed the woman, making the sign of the cross. "What?" "Martha, I need you to warm some milk and find some clean blankets," Emily ordered, climbing the porch steps. "And please don't ask questions yet. This little one needs immediate attention." The wolf stopped at the foot of the stairs, as if understanding that its task was done for the moment. Emily turned to it, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've saved a life tonight." The animal looked at her one last time before disappearing into the shadows of the night, leaving Emily with the certainty that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. As she entered the house with the baby in her arms, she couldn't shake the feeling that fate had woven an invisible net that had just caught her in its center. Dawn arrived at Sunrise Ranch, bringing with it an unsettling calm. Emily remained seated in her living room rocking chair, contemplating the baby who now slept peacefully in her arms. Martha had prepared an improvised Moses basket with a large basket and soft blankets, but Emily couldn't bring herself to let go of the little one. "Ma'am," Martha whispered, approaching with a cup of hot tea. "We should notify the authorities." Emily nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off the baby's face. "We will, Martha, but there's something about all this that doesn't quite add up." Her fingers gently brushed a silver medallion hanging from the baby's neck, half hidden among the blankets. It was an ancient piece, with an elaborate engraving showing a crescent moon intertwined with what appeared to be olive branches. "This medallion, it's not just any jewel," Emily murmured. "Whoever left the baby in the forest wanted us to find it with this." The light of dawn was beginning to filter through the windows when the sound of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. It was Sheriff Jake Peterson's truck, a family friend for years. Emily had decided to call him directly instead of making a formal report immediately. "Good morning, Emily," Jake greeted as he entered, removing his hat. He was a middle-aged man, with graying hair and shrewd eyes that missed no detail. His expression softened when he saw the baby. "So what you told me on the phone is true?" "Everything is exactly as I told you, Jake," Emily replied, proceeding to tell him the details of the previous night. The sheriff listened attentively, taking notes in his notebook. "And you say it was the wolf who led you to the baby?" he asked, his tone mixing skepticism and fascination. "Emily, in my 20 years of service, I've never heard anything like this. I can hardly believe it myself," she admitted. "But that wolf, there's something special about it. It's not a common animal." Jake approached to examine the medallion, photographing it with his phone. "This could help us identify its origin. Have you noticed anything else, any particular mark or sign?" Emily shook her head, but Martha, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "The blanket it was wrapped in," the woman said, "has a peculiar embroidery in one corner. Their initials, AVM. The sheriff added this information to his notes. Well, this gives us something to start with. Emily, I need you to come to the station later to make a formal statement. Meanwhile, the baby—" "We'll stay here," Emily interrupted firmly. "At least until we know more about its origin. I have everything needed to care for it, and Martha will help me." Jake looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "I'll have to notify social services, but given your position in the community and the ranch's resources, I don't think there will be a problem with the little one staying here temporarily." As they discussed the legal details, a movement in the window caught Emily's attention. The grey wolf was there, watching from the garden. Its golden eyes seemed to shine with approval before disappearing among the bushes. "Jake," Emily called, "there's something else you should know." She proceeded to tell him about the strange tracks that had been appearing around the property for the past few weeks, always in specific patterns, as if someone was watching the ranch. The sheriff frowned. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" "It didn't seem important until now," Emily replied. "But after last night, what if someone knew the wolf would find the baby? What if all this is part of something bigger?" A heavy silence fell over the room, interrupted only by the soft babbling of the baby who was beginning to wake up. Emily gently rocked it, aware that each answer they found only brought with it more questions. "Whatever it is," Jake finally said, "be careful, Emily. Sometimes the biggest mysteries begin with the smallest coincidences." The morning progressed slowly at the ranch, as Emily prepared everything for her visit to the sheriff's office. The baby, whom she had started calling Luke provisionally, slept peacefully in Martha's arms. Before leaving, Emily paused in front of the mirror in the entryway, noticing the dark circles that betrayed her sleepless night, when a detail on the baby's medallion caught her attention in the natural light. "Martha, could you bring the magnifying glass from my desk?" she asked, leaning in to examine the jewel more closely. When the housekeeper returned with the instrument, Emily discovered something fascinating. Tiny symbols engraved around the crescent moon, almost invisible to the naked eye. "They seem to be some kind of ancient writing," Emily murmured, photographing the discovery with her phone. At that moment, the sound of horse hooves interrupted her investigation. Through the window, she saw Dr. Robert Andrews, the town librarian and local history expert, approaching. "Emily," Robert greeted as he dismounted. He was a man in his 50s with round glasses and an absent-minded scholarly air. "Jake told me what happened. I came as soon as I could." "There's something you need to know." Emily invited him in, intrigued by the urgency in his voice. Robert took an old book from his satchel, its yellowed pages crinkling as he opened it on the dining room table. "This is a record of the founding families of the region," he explained, carefully turning the pages with reverent care. "When Jake described the medallion to me, I remembered seeing something similar in these documents." He stopped on a page that showed a drawing of a medallion almost identical to the one the baby wore. This symbol belonged to the Valdez family, one of the oldest and most mysterious in the region. They disappeared almost 20 years ago after strange circumstances. "AVM?" Emily interrupted, remembering the initials on the blanket. "Could it be?" Robert nodded gravely. "The initials match the surname, but there's more." He extracted a yellowed newspaper from his satchel. 20 years ago, the last Valdez heiress, Alexandra, disappeared without a trace. The most curious thing is that, according to rumors, she had a special connection with the wolves of the region. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of connection? The townspeople said she could communicate with them, that the wolves protected her. Of course, everyone considered it mere superstition until... Robert paused, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Until what?" Emily pressed. "Until they found her diary. She wrote about an ancient family prophecy, something related to a special gift that passed from generation to generation. Unfortunately, the diary disappeared shortly after, along with most of the family documents." Martha, who had been listening silently, approached with the baby. "Ma'am, look at this," she said, pointing to a crescent-shaped birthmark on the little one's shoulder, now visible as she had changed his clothes. Robert leaned in to examine the mark, his eyes shining with academic excitement. "The records mention that all Valdez family members were born with that mark. Emily, this baby could be the last heir of their lineage." The sound of a distant howl made everyone turn towards the window. The grey wolf was there, sitting at the edge of the forest, its presence a silent confirmation of Robert's words. "There's something else," added the librarian, lowering his voice. "According to local legends, the family had a guardian, a protective spirit that took the form of a grey wolf and appeared in times of need to protect the heirs." Emily looked alternately at the baby and the wolf in the distance, as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a way that defied all logic. "Are you suggesting that..." "That maybe," Robert completed. "It wasn't a coincidence that Wolf found the baby. Maybe it's fulfilling an ancestral duty, one that goes beyond our understanding." A knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Jake, with a serious expression on his face. "Emily, we need to talk. We found something in the forest, near where the baby appeared." Jake spread a worn map and an old photograph on the table, while Emily, Robert, and Martha watched attentively. Baby Luke slept peacefully in his makeshift basket, oblivious to the tension floating in the air. "We found this buried near where the baby appeared," Jake explained, pointing to the yellowed corners of the map. "It was inside a sealed metal box. The most interesting thing isn't the map itself, but what's marked on it." Emily leaned over the document. It was a detailed map of the region, but what caught her attention were the marks in red ink that formed a specific pattern around several properties, including her ranch. "These marks," Robert pointed out, adjusting his glasses, "coincide exactly with the ancient boundaries of the Valdez family lands. But there's something else." His fingers traced a series of small symbols drawn in the margins of the map. "These are the same symbols that appear on the baby's medallion." The photograph, Jake continued, is even more revealing. The image, although faded by time, showed a young woman standing in front of the old Valdez mansion. At her side, sitting with an almost human dignity, was a gray wolf identical to the one now roaming the ranch. "It's her," Emily whispered. "Alexandra Valdez." "The date on the back of the photo is exactly 20 years ago," Jake added, "the day before her disappearance." Martha, who had remained silent, came closer to examine the photograph better. "Ma'am, look at the medallion she's wearing around her neck. It's the same one the baby has." Emily felt a chill run down her spine when she noticed another detail in the photograph. Alexandra had one hand resting on her belly in an unmistakably maternal gesture. "Was she pregnant when she disappeared?" Emily asked, her mind working at full speed to connect the pieces of the puzzle. "According to the medical records we just unearthed, yes," Jake confirmed. "But there's more. Among the documents found was a letter dated the day of her disappearance." Jake took a yellowed envelope from his jacket and began to read. "Dear daughter, if you are reading this, it means the time has come for you to know the truth about our legacy. The gift that runs through our blood is both a blessing and a responsibility. The Guardians have protected our family for generations, and now it's your turn to understand why. The medallion you wear contains secrets that go beyond our modern understanding. Each symbol tells a story, a promise made centuries ago. Take care of it, for it is the key that opens doors many would prefer to keep closed. The prophecy speaks of a time when the last heir will reunite what was divided. When the new moon meets the ancient promise, the Guardians will walk among us again. I love you, my little Luna. Mom." A deep silence fell over the room when Jake finished reading. The baby stirred in his sleep, and the medallion around his neck shimmered faintly in the light filtering through the window. "Emily," Robert said with a trembling voice, "there are records of a prophecy in the family archives. It speaks of a cycle that completes every 100 years, when the old blood and the new unite under the protection of the Guardians." "Are you suggesting that this baby—" Emily began, but was interrupted by a howl that seemed to make the window panes vibrate. Everyone turned towards the outside. The grey wolf was standing in the garden, but this time it wasn't alone. At its side, emerging from the shadows of the forest, a smaller figure moved with feline grace. A silver wolf, whose eyes shone with the same supernatural intelligence as its companion. Emily remained motionless by the window, observing the two wolves now guarding her garden. The silver wolf moved with hypnotic elegance, its amber eyes fixed on the house, as if it could see through the walls to where baby Luke slept. "In all my years studying the history of the Valdez family," Robert murmured, frantically leafing through his book of records, "I've never found mention of two guardians at the same time. Here," he suddenly pointed out, his trembling finger on a yellowed page. "There's a cryptic reference in the oldest writings. When the moon divides and the twin guardians reunite, the circle will begin to close." Martha, who had been unusually quiet, approached the sleeping baby. "The medallion," she whispered. "It's glowing." Indeed, the ancient silver medallion was emitting a soft bluish glow, barely perceptible but undeniable. Emily moved closer to examine it better, and noticed that the engraved symbols seemed to move under the light, as if coming to life. "The symbols!" exclaimed Robert, adjusting his glasses with academic excitement. "They're not just decorative. They're a message. I need my university notes. I studied ancient languages during my doctorate, and this looks like—" A knock on the door interrupted his musings. Jake, who had stepped out moments before to make a call, entered with a grave expression. "I just spoke with my contacts in the capital," he announced. "They've found something in the sealed files of Alexandra's case. Apparently, the night she disappeared, there were reports of strange lights in the sky above the old Valdez mansion. And that's not all. The guards reported seeing a young woman walking towards the forest, followed by 2 wolves. 2 wolves? Emily repeated, looking again towards the garden where the majestic creatures remained vigilant. According to the report, Jake continued, one was grey and the other silver, exactly like the ones out there now. Robert dropped his book heavily on the table. The prophecy speaks of a cycle, of an ancestral promise. The Valdez family wasn't ordinary. It was said they had the gift of communicating with the spirits of the forest, that they had made a pact with forces beyond our understanding. But why now? Emily asked, gently rocking Luke, who was beginning to stir in his sleep. Why bring the baby here to my ranch? Your ranch, Martha intervened with a trembling voice, is built on what were once the sacred lands of the Valdez family. The circle the prophecy speaks of, perhaps it refers to this, the return to the origin. A distant thunder rumbled in the sky, despite there being no visible storm clouds. The baby woke with a start, but instead of crying, his eyes fixed on the window where the 2 wolves remained motionless. There's something else, said Jake, pulling another document from his jacket. In the old property records, we found that your family, Emily, the Morgans, and the Valdez were connected. Your great-great-grandmother was the younger sister of the Valdez matriarch of that time. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. What are you saying? That the blood of the Valdez also runs through your veins, Robert responded, his eyes shining with understanding. That's why the wolf chose you. That's why it guided you to the baby. It wasn't a coincidence. It was destiny completing a circle that began generations ago. At that moment, the baby extended his small hand towards the medallion hanging from his neck, and the bluish glow intensified. Through the window, the 2 wolves raised their heads in unison and emitted a howl that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. The prophecy, Robert whispered, mentions that when the twin guardians reunite and the ancient blood recognizes the new, the time of revelations will begin. Emily, I think we're about to discover truths that have remained hidden for generations. Twilight began to paint the sky in shades of violet when Robert finally managed to decipher part of the symbols on the medallion. His hands trembled as he transcribed the ancient inscriptions into his notebook. It's incredible, he muttered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. The symbols form a kind of map, but not an ordinary one. It's a map of ley lines, ancient energy paths that the Valdez family believed crossed their lands. Emily, who had just finished feeding Luke, approached to examine the notes. And those marks that repeat. They're convergence points, Robert explained, places where energy concentrates, and look at this. He pointed to a specific spot in his notes. This symbol appears 3 times, forming a perfect triangle. One of the points is exactly where your ranch is, Emily. Another is at the old Valdez mansion. And the third, it's in the middle of the forest, Jake completed, who had been comparing the notes with the found map. In a place called Moon Clearing. Martha, who had remained near the window observing the wolves, turned abruptly. Moon Clearing. My grandmother used to tell stories about that place. She said that on new moon nights, strange lights could be seen and that wolves gathered there to perform ancient rituals. The baby, who had been calm until then, began to stir in Emily's arms. The medallion glowed again, this time with more intensity. Emily, Robert said gravely, there's more. I've managed to translate another part of the inscription. When the ancient blood and the new meet in the sacred circle, the guardians will reveal the path to the hidden truth. The sacred circle? Emily asked, gently rocking the baby to calm him. Moon Clearing, Robert answered. According to these records, it was a place of ceremony for the Valdez family. And there's something else. The last entry in Alexandra's diary, the one found after her disappearance, specifically mentions this place. Jake took out his notepad and read, "Tonight is the new moon. The guardians have shown me the way. I must protect the legacy, protect what's coming. If something happens to me, the circle will complete when the time is right. The guardians will know when and whom to guide." A deep silence fell over the room, broken only by the baby's soft breathing and the occasional rustling of pages that Robert continued to examine. "Emily," Martha suddenly said, her voice filled with urgency. "The wolves, they're trying to tell us something." Everyone turned to the window. The 2 wolves were now standing, their postures alert. The silver wolf took a step forward, inclining its head in a specific direction. the path leading to the forest. "Tonight," Emily whispered, feeling a shiver run down her spine, "is the new moon." "And the symbols on the medallion," Robert added, frantically consulting his notes, "form a pattern that only completes during the new moon. Emily, I think the Guardians want us to follow them." "But the baby," Martha began, worried. "The baby must come with us," Emily said, with a certainty she didn't know she possessed. "He's part of this, part of the circle that must be completed." Jake, always practical, checked his service weapon and took out a flashlight. "I won't allow you to go alone. Besides, if we're going to discover what happened to Alexandra 20 years ago, I want to be present." Emily wrapped Luke in an extra blanket, making sure the medallion remained visible. As they prepared to leave, she noticed that the symbols on the jewel seemed to pulse with their own light, as if responding to a call that only they could hear. "The ancient secrets of the Valdez family," Robert murmured as they headed towards the door, "are about to be revealed. I just hope we're prepared for what we're going to discover." The wolves, as if understanding every word, began to walk towards the forest, occasionally stopping to make sure the group was following them. The moonless night enveloped them as they ventured into the thicket, guided by the ancestral guardians, towards a destiny that would change their lives forever. The darkness of the forest seemed to come alive as the group advanced following the wolves. Emily held Luke close to her chest, noticing how the medallion emitted increasingly frequent flashes, as if responding to an invisible energy that grew stronger with each step they took. "The trees," Robert whispered, illuminating the surrounding trunks with his flashlight. "Look at the markings." Ancient symbols, similar to those on the medallion, had been carved into the bark of the oldest trees. Time had worn them down, but they were still visible, forming a path that perfectly matched the route the wolves were following. "They're signs," Robert explained, consulting his notes as they walked. "The Valdez family marked the sacred paths with these symbols. Each one has a specific meaning: protection, guidance, revelation." Martha, who walked beside Emily, kept crossing herself. "My grandmother used to say that on nights like this, when the new moon darkens the sky, the veils between worlds become thinner." Jake, who was bringing up the rear with his weapon ready, suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" A soft sound, like a distant chant, floated in the night air. It didn't seem to come from any specific direction, but surrounded them completely, as if the forest itself was whispering ancient secrets. The wolves stopped at the edge of a perfectly circular clearing. The absence of the moon made the stars shine with unusual intensity, illuminating the natural space with a silvery, ethereal light. In the center of the clearing, an ancient stone formation formed a perfect circle. "The moon circle," Robert murmured reverently. The legends were true. The baby, who had remained extraordinarily calm throughout the journey, began to stir. His small hands reached for the medallion, which now shone with such intensity that it illuminated Emily's face with a bluish glow. The silver wolf advanced towards the center of the stone circle and, to everyone's amazement, sat on its haunches and began to gently dig in the earth with one of its paws. The grey wolf remained in its position, as if standing guard. "It's trying to show us something," Emily said, carefully approaching. Jake followed her closely, his flashlight revealing something metallic that was beginning to appear among the disturbed earth. "It's a box," Jake exclaimed, kneeling to help unearth it. It was an ancient silver chest, covered with the same symbols that appeared on the baby's medallion. Robert approached to examine the engravings. "It's incredible. This chest must be centuries old, and look, it has a very peculiar lock." Emily immediately noticed that the shape of the lock perfectly matched the medallion the baby was wearing. With trembling hands, she carefully removed the jewel from Luke's neck. The moment the medallion approached the chest, the symbols on both objects began to glow in unison. A soft click resonated in the clearing when Emily inserted the medallion into the lock. Inside the chest, they found an ancient book, its pages yellowed but perfectly preserved, and several sealed envelopes with the Valdez family emblem. "It's Alexandra's lost diary," Robert whispered, taking the book with reverence. "And these letters?" Emily took one of the envelopes. On the front, written in elegant calligraphy, she read, "For my daughter, when the guardians find her." The baby let out a soft coo, as if understanding the importance of the moment. The wolves, which had remained alert until then, moved closer to the group, their eyes shining with supernatural intelligence. "There's something else," said Jake, illuminating the bottom of the chest. "Photographs, and what appears to be a detailed map of underground tunnels." Martha, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "The secret tunnels of the Valdez family. My grandmother spoke of them. She said they connected sacred points throughout the region and that one of them led to a special place under the old mansion." Emily, holding the baby with one arm, took the diary with her free hand and opened it to the last entry, dated the night of Alexandra's disappearance. The first lines made her heart stop for a moment. "If you're reading this, it means the Guardians have fulfilled their promise. My baby is safe, and the circle is about to complete. But there's more at stake than just our family legacy. What I discovered in the ancient tunnels, what I had to protect." Emily's hands trembled as she held Alexandra's diary. The group had taken shelter in a small cave near Moon Clearing, where Jake had managed to light a small camping lamp he carried in his backpack. The wolves stood guard at the entrance, their silhouettes outlined against the starry night. "Read it," Robert whispered, as he took baby Luke in his arms so Emily could concentrate on the yellowed pages. Emily began to read aloud. April 15th, 2004. "The Guardians are restless. They've been appearing more often near the mansion, as if trying to warn me of something. The pregnancy is progressing well, and each day I feel a stronger connection to the ancient powers of our family. The baby moves when the wolves are near, as if it can sense them. I've been researching in the family library, following the clues Mom left before she departed. The symbols on the medallion aren't just decorative. They're a code, a map, that leads to something greater than our own legacy. The tunnels beneath the mansion hold secrets that could change everything we believe we know about our history." Emily turned the page, noticing that the writing became more urgent. April 20th, 2004. "I found it. In the deepest chamber of the tunnels, behind a door marked with the symbols of the new moon, I discovered something extraordinary. An ancient manuscript that speaks of a pact between our family and the Guardians of the Forest. They weren't just wolves. They're something more, something ancient and powerful. The pact was sealed with blood and magic, granting our family the gift of communication with the forest spirits. But there was a condition. We had to protect something. A secret so powerful that it could change the balance of the natural world if it fell into the wrong hands." Martha let out a small gasp when Emily reached the next entry. April 25th, 2004. "They're looking for me. They've discovered what I found in the tunnels. I can't allow them to get hold of the ancient manuscript or the lunar crystal. My baby will be born soon, and I know I won't be able to keep her by my side. The Guardians have shown me visions. My daughter will have to grow up away until the right time comes. I've prepared everything. The medallion contains the keys to finding what I've hidden. Only someone with Valdez blood will be able to fully decipher the symbols. And the Guardians? They will protect my little one until it's time to return." The last entry was dated on the night of her disappearance. April 30th, 2004. "This will be my last entry. The Guardians have shown me the way. The lunar crystal is safe, hidden where no one will be able to find it without the right guidance. My baby will be born tonight, under the new moon, as tradition dictates." Emily, if you're reading this because I know it will be you who finds these pages, you must know it wasn't a coincidence. Our families are connected by something deeper than blood. The medallion will guide you, along with the Guardians, towards the next step. Take care of my daughter. I've named her Luna, following the family tradition. When the time is right, the symbols on the medallion will reveal their last secret. But be careful. There are others who seek our legacy, who have been waiting for generations to seize the power of the lunar crystal. The tunnels beneath the old mansion guard the entrance to the sacred chamber. Only when the ancient blood and the new unite under the light of the new moon will the path be fully revealed. Trust in the Guardians. They know the way. With eternal love, Alexandra. Emily closed the diary, her mind processing all the information. The baby, Luna, had fallen asleep in Robert's arms, the medallion on his neck emitting a soft glow. "The map of the tunnels," said Jake, spreading out the document found in the chest. "It shows a complex network under the old mansion, but there's a section that's marked differently." Robert adjusted his glasses, examining the map. "These symbols, they're the same ones that appear on the medallion. And look, there's a special mark on this central chamber right below where the main study of the mansion used to be." "The sacred chamber," Emily whispered, remembering the words from the diary, where Alexandra hid the lunar crystal and the family secrets. The wolves at the entrance of the cave emitted a soft growl as if confirming her words. The moonless night seemed to whisper ancient secrets as the group began to understand that their adventure was just beginning. Dawn was beginning to tint the horizon in shades of pink when the group emerged from the forest in front of the old Valdez mansion. The imposing structure rose against the sky like a silent testimony to past eras, its dark windows watching them like vigilant eyes. "It's bigger than I remembered," Jake murmured, consulting the map as they advanced along the overgrown path leading to the main entrance. The two wolves had gone ahead, moving cautiously around the property. Emily held Luna close to her chest, noticing how the medallion seemed to pulse more intensely as they approached the mansion. The baby was awake but extraordinarily calm, her large dark eyes fixed on the structure before them. "The mansion has been abandoned since Alexandra's disappearance," Robert explained, consulting his notes. "But according to local records, some townspeople claim to have seen strange lights in the windows during new moon nights." Martha crossed herself as they passed under the old stone arch marking the entrance to the gardens. "My grandmother used to say the mansion has a life of its own, that the spirits of the Valdez family never really left it." Upon reaching the main porch, Jake tried to open the heavy oak door. It was locked, but before he could suggest looking for another entrance, the medallion around Luna's neck emitted an intense flash. "The symbols," Robert pointed out, moving closer to examine the doorframe. "There are marks carved here, almost invisible under years of deterioration. They're the same as on the medallion." Emily approached, holding Luna so that the medallion was close to the marks. The effect was immediate. A soft click resonated from inside the door, and it slowly opened with a creak. The interior of the mansion was a study in contrasts. Antique furniture covered with white sheets cast ghostly shadows, while rays of light filtered through dirty windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The wallpaper, though faded, still showed elegant patterns that included the same symbols they had seen on the medallion. "According to the map," Jake said, illuminating with his flashlight, "the entrance to the tunnel should be in the main study, in the east wing of the mansion." As they advanced through the silent hallways, Emily noticed something peculiar. "The paintings on the walls, they're family portraits, but look at the details in the backgrounds." Robert moved closer to examine one of the portraits. "Incredible. Each painting contains hidden symbols in the background, like clues left through generations." Upon reaching the main study, they found an impressive circular room with bookshelves reaching up to the high ceiling. In the center, an antique mahogany desk dominated the space, and above it, a huge portrait of Alexandra Valdez watched over them. "It's her," Emily whispered, observing the serene face of the woman in the portrait. "Luna has her eyes." The silver wolf, which had been exploring the room, began to gently scratch a specific section of the floor near the desk. The gray wolf stayed close to Emily and Luna, as if wanting to protect them from something invisible. Jake and Robert moved the ancient rug, revealing a metal trapdoor with elaborate engravings. In the center, there was a circular indentation that perfectly matched the medallion. "The letters," Emily suddenly remembered, taking out the packet of envelopes they had found in the chest. "There's one specifically marked for this moment." With trembling hands, she opened the corresponding envelope and began to read. "Dear Luna, if you're reading this, you've reached the first threshold. The tunnels beneath the mansion guard more than family secrets. They are the testimony of an ancestral pact between our family and the most ancient forces of the forest. The lunar crystal, our most sacred legacy, lies hidden in the deepest chamber. But be careful. The tunnels were designed to protect not only from intruders, but also from those who are not prepared to face the truth they guard. Only when the medallion, the ancient blood, and the new unite under the blessing of the guardians, will the true path be revealed. With love, your mother." The medallion around Luna's neck shone with renewed intensity, as if responding to her mother's words. The wolves approached the group, their eyes shining with ancestral intelligence, while the trapdoor emitted a soft bluish glow, inviting them to descend towards the secrets that awaited in the darkness. The stone steps descended in a spiral into the darkness, each step echoing with a resonance that suggested vast spaces hidden beneath the mansion. Jake led the way with his flashlight, followed by Emily holding Luna, while the wolves moved silently beside them, like silver shadows in the penumbra. These tunnels, Robert commented, illuminating the walls with his own flashlight, are much older than the mansion. Look at the architecture, the way the stones are carved. This could be from the colonial era, or even earlier. The walls were covered with symbols similar to those on the medallion, but organized in more complex patterns. Emily noticed that some seemed to glow faintly when the flashlight's beams reached them, as if they were made of a phosphorescent material. "They're markers," Martha explained, her voice resonating in the tunnel. "My grandmother spoke of how the ancient guardians marked the sacred paths with paints that glowed in the dark, made with materials only they knew. They reached a circular chamber where the tunnel split into 3 different paths. Each entrance was marked with distinct symbols. One showed a crescent moon, another a full moon, and the third a new moon. Luna, who had been quiet until then, began to stir. The medallion on her neck emitted a more intense glow, illuminating the symbols of the entrance marked with the new moon. The diary mentioned the new moon, Emily recalled, and tonight is the new moon, Robert completed. It can't be a coincidence. The wolves moved forward towards the new moon tunnel, but stopped abruptly. The grey wolf emitted a soft warning growl. "Wait," said Jake, illuminating the floor with his flashlight. "Look at the tiles." The tunnel floor was composed of square slabs, each marked with different lunar symbols. Some seemed more worn than others, and some had marks suggesting they could sink under pressure. "It's a test," Robert murmured, frantically consulting his notes and the diary. "Here, Alexandra wrote something about this. The path to truth can only be traversed by those who understand the lunar cycle and respect the ancestral order." Emily approached the edge of the tunnel, holding Luna firmly. The medallion projected its light onto the tiles, revealing that some symbols glowed more intensely than others. "The symbols," Emily pointed out, "they're not random. Look how they align. It's the complete lunar cycle, from new moon to the next new moon." "A safe path," Robert added, comparing the symbols with his notes. "If we follow the correct order of the lunar cycle." Martha, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "My grandmother used to sing a song about the phases of the moon. It was a way to teach children the sacred order." The silver wolf approached the first tile, the one showing the new moon symbol, and gently touched it with its paw. The tile emitted a soft bluish glow, but didn't sink. "It's the path," Emily said with certainty. "We must follow the lunar cycle step by step." Jake tested the theory, carefully stepping on the first tile. "New moon waxing crescent, first quarter." Following the precise order of the lunar phases, the group slowly advanced through the tunnel. Each correct step was confirmed by a soft bluish glow, while the incorrect tiles remained dark. At the end of the tile path, they found another ancient door. This time the medallion reacted before they could approach, emitting a pulse of light that illuminated the entire chamber. "There's something engraved here," Robert said, examining the door. "It's a warning. Beyond this door, the secrets of the ancients await. Only those who carry the blood of the guardians and understand the true meaning of the pact may continue." Luna extended her small hand towards the door, and the medallion shone with renewed intensity. The symbols on the door began to move, rearranging themselves as if they had a life of their own. "The guardians," Emily whispered, observing the wolves that had sat on both sides of the door. "They're not just here to protect, they're here to guide." The grey wolf approached Emily and Luna, gently touching the medallion with its muzzle. At that moment, the symbols on the door aligned in a new pattern, and an ancient mechanism began to move within the stone. The ancient door opened with a deep sound that reverberated through the tunnels, revealing a chamber that left everyone breathless. It was an immense circular hall, with a ceiling so high it was lost in darkness. In the center, a circle of stone columns surrounded an elevated platform, and on the walls, intricate murals told a story that seemed as old as time itself. "It's incredible," Robert whispered, his voice mixing awe and academic reverence. "These murals, they must be centuries old. Look, they're narrating a story." Emily approached the walls, carefully holding Luna as she observed the images. The murals showed human figures interacting with majestic wolves, and above them, always present, the image of a crystal that seemed to capture the light of the moon. "The original pact," Robert explained, consulting his notes while examining the murals. "Here is represented the moment when the first Valdez family members arrived in these lands. And these symbols, they predate Spanish colonization. Martha approached a particular section of the mural that showed a ceremony under the new moon. Look, the wolves in the painting, they're identical to our guardians. The two wolves, as if understanding they were being mentioned, approached the central platform. The silver wolf emitted a soft howl that resonated strangely in the chamber, as if the sound was being amplified by the architecture of the place itself. "There's something else," said Jake, illuminating text engraved on the base of the platform. "It's written in several languages, Old Spanish, Latin, and others I don't recognize." Robert knelt to examine the inscriptions. "It's the history of the Pact. On the moonless night, when the veils between worlds thin, the first guardians chose our family to protect the balance between light and shadow. The lunar crystal, a gift from the ancient spirits, was entrusted to our custody, its power sealed by blood and eternal promise. Luna began to stir in Emily's arms, and the medallion emitted a more intense pulse of light than before. The baby extended her small hands towards the central platform, where a pedestal rose with an indentation that seemed specifically designed for the medallion. "There are more inscriptions here," Robert continued, translating. "Only when the ancient blood and the new unite under the blessing of the guardians will the crystal reveal its true purpose. The power lies not in the crystal itself, but in the sacred bond between the guardians and the chosen ones." Emily approached the pedestal, noticing that the symbols carved on it began to glow in response to the proximity of the medallion. "The guardians, they're not just protectors, are they? They're part of something older, deeper." "According to these texts," Robert responded, running his fingers over the ancient inscriptions, "the guardian wolves are manifestations of ancestral spirits that have protected these lands since time immemorial. The pact with the Valdez family was more than an agreement. It was a fusion of destinies." The silver wolf approached Emily and Luna, its eyes shining with supernatural intelligence. With a gentle movement, it touched the medallion with its muzzle, and it emitted a flash that illuminated the entire chamber. At that moment, new inscriptions began to appear on the walls, glowing with their own light. They were texts that had remained invisible for centuries, revealing themselves only in the combined presence of the guardians, the medallion, and the heirs of the pact. "The true power of the lunar crystal," Robert read, his voice trembling with emotion, "is not to dominate nature, but to restore lost balance. In times of darkness, when the bond between worlds weakens, the heirs of the pact must gather under the new moon to renew the ancient promise." Emily felt Luna calm in her arms, as if the baby understood the importance of the moment. The guardian wolves positioned themselves on either side of the pedestal, and the medallion began to pulse with a rhythm that seemed synchronized with their heartbeats. "There's one last inscription appearing," Robert announced, pointing to the pedestal. "The path to the crystal will open only when the blood of the guardians and the protected unite in perfect harmony. But beware, for the power of the crystal attracts both those who seek to protect and those who wish to destroy." A distant sound, like footsteps approaching through the tunnels, interrupted the moment of revelation. The guardian wolves tensed, their ears alert and their eyes fixed on the chamber's entrance. The footsteps drew closer through the tunnel, echoing ever nearer to the sacred chamber. Jake cautiously drew his weapon, while the guardian wolves adopted a protective stance in front of Emily and Luna. Suddenly, a woman's voice resonated in the darkness. "Don't be afraid. I've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. A figure emerged from the shadows, an older woman with silver hair and eyes that shone with ancient wisdom. She wore simple but elegant clothes, and around her neck gleamed a medallion similar to Luna's, though older. "Isabella Valdez," Robert whispered, recognizing her from his research. "Alexandra's great-aunt. Everyone thought she had left years ago. I kept myself hidden," Isabella replied, her voice soft but firm, waiting for the moment when the guardians would find the heir. Her eyes settled on Luna, and a smile illuminated her aged face. The ancient blood and the new reunited at last. The guardian wolves visibly relaxed in her presence, and the silver wolf even approached to gently brush its muzzle against her hand. "You knew," Emily said, understanding. "You knew this would happen." Isabella nodded, approaching with measured steps. "The guardians showed me visions of the future, the night Alexandra came to me seeking protection. I knew I had to remain as a silent watcher until this moment arrived." She stopped in front of the central pedestal, her fingers gently brushing the ancient symbols. "The lunar crystal is not just a family relic. It is the very heart of the pact between the guardians and our blood. Alexandra discovered its true purpose, and that's why she had to protect it at all costs. "Where is she?" Emily asked, holding Luna more firmly. Isabella sighed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "My great-niece did what she had to do to protect both the legacy and her daughter. She's safe, but she cannot reunite with us until the circle is complete." "The symbols on the wall," Robert intervened, pointing to the glowing inscriptions, "speak of a ceremony under the new moon, a renewal of the ancestral pact." "That's right," Isabella confirmed. "The power of the lunar crystal must be renewed every 100 years when the ancient blood and the new unite under the blessing of the guardians. Tonight, that union is possible thanks to you, Emily, and little Luna." The old woman drew from her clothes an ancient book, its pages yellowed but perfectly preserved. "This is the true diary of the guardians, passed down from generation to generation. It contains the rituals necessary for the renewal of the pact." As Isabella spoke, Luna's medallion began to glow more intensely, responding to the presence of the ancestral book. The symbols on the walls pulsed with their own light, as if the chamber itself was coming to life. "The ritual must begin soon," Isabella warned, observing the shadows moving on the walls. "When the moonless night reaches its darkest point, the veil between worlds will be thinnest, and the power of the lunar crystal can be renewed." "But we still haven't found the crystal," Jake pointed out, who had maintained his vigilant position. Isabella smiled mysteriously. "The crystal has always been here, hidden in plain sight." She approached the central pedestal and pressed a series of symbols in a specific order. A soft, mechanical rumble resonated in the chamber, and the floor around the pedestal began to move, revealing a spiral staircase that descended towards a blue light. "The inner sanctuary," Isabella explained, "where the lunar crystal has waited for centuries for the moment of its renewal. But we must hurry. We are not the only ones who know the importance of this night." As if confirming her words, a distant sound of more footsteps echoed in the tunnels, this time accompanied by unfamiliar voices, approaching from several directions. The unfamiliar voices drew closer through the tunnels as Isabella guided the group towards the spiral staircase. The guardian wolves took defensive positions. The grey wolf remained at the entrance of the main chamber, while the silver wolf descended with them towards the inner sanctuary. "Quickly," Isabella whispered. "We don't have much time." The staircase descended in a perfect spiral, each step marked with luminescent symbols that glowed beneath their feet. Emily held Luna firmly, noticing how the baby's medallion emitted increasingly intense flashes as they descended. The inner sanctuary was a smaller octagonal chamber, but of breathtaking beauty. In the center, floating in a column of blue light, the lunar crystal slowly rotated on itself. It was an object of indescribable beauty, transparent as the purest water, but with flashes of light that seemed to come from within, as if it contained the glow of 1,000 moons. "The heart of the pact," Isabella murmured, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "The crystal that unites the guardians with our family since time immemorial." Robert marveled at the walls of the chamber, where ancient frescoes showed scenes of the first pact. "It's extraordinary. These frescoes show the original ceremony, when the first Valdez received the crystal from the hands of the forest spirits." "The ritual must begin now," Isabella said urgently, as echoes of voices and footsteps approaching could be heard above. "Emily, I need you to hold Luna close to the crystal. The medallion will act as a bridge between the ancient blood and the new." Martha, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "The voices, they're searching for something. I can hear them moving things in the upper chamber." Jake climbed several steps, his weapon ready. "I'll keep them away as long as possible. Robert, help me block the entrance." Isabella opened the ancient book of the Guardians, its pages glowing faintly in the blue light of the crystal. "The ritual requires the presence of both bloodlines. Emily, as a descendant of the Morgan branch of our family, and Luna as the direct heir of the Valdez, must unite under the Guardian's blessing." The silver wolf approached the crystal, its eyes shining with supernatural intelligence. Isabella began to recite words in an ancient language, while the lunar crystal pulsed with an increasingly intense light. "Emily," Isabella instructed, "place Luna's medallion near the crystal, but without touching it. The power must flow naturally between them." As Emily followed the instructions, the medallion began to vibrate softly. Luna, instead of being frightened, extended her small hands towards the crystal. as if recognizing its importance. Suddenly a howl resonated from the upper chamber. The grey wolf was sounding the alarm. The unknown footsteps had multiplied, and now voices could be heard giving orders. "They must be down here," shouted an unfamiliar male voice. "The crystal has to be close." "There's no time to lose," Isabella said, her voice firm despite the tension. "The ritual must be completed before they find us." "Emily, repeat the words of the pact with me." Isabella began to recite an ancient promise in English, her words blending with the soft hum of the crystal. "By the blood that unites us and the power that guides us, by the moon that watches and the guardians that protect, we renew the sacred pact on this moonless night, uniting what was separated, healing what was broken." The lunar crystal began to spin faster, its light intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. Luna's medallion responded with an equally intense glow, and the baby let out a soft laugh, as if understanding the magic surrounding her. Above, the sounds of struggle mingled with the howls of the wolves. Jake and Robert were doing their best to keep the entrance to the inner sanctuary blocked, but it was evident they couldn't contain the intruders much longer. "The ritual is almost complete," Isabella whispered, her eyes fixed on the crystal that now pulsed with the rhythm of an ancient heart. "We just need a few more moments." The inner sanctuary vibrated with ancient energy as the ritual reached its culmination. The lunar crystal floated in its column of light, spinning ever faster, its bluish radiance intensifying until it became a beacon of pure light that illuminated every corner of the octagonal chamber. "Almost there!" exclaimed Isabella, her voice mingling with the echoes of the battle unfolding above. "The bond between the ancient blood and the new is nearly complete." Emily held Luna close to the crystal, watching in awe as the baby's medallion pulsed in perfect synchrony with the flashes of the lunar crystal. Little Luna, far from showing fear, laughed softly as she extended her tiny hands towards the light, as if she could touch the invisible threads of magic weaving the ancient pact. Suddenly a crash resounded from the upper chamber, followed by the sound of stone against stone. Jake's voice came from the top of the stairs. "We can't hold them back much longer." The silver wolf, which had remained next to Emily and Luna, raised its head and emitted a howl that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. The sound resonated throughout the underground structure and was immediately answered by its companion's howl from above. "The Guardians," Martha whispered, her eyes shining with understanding. "They're calling to the spirits of the forest." Isabella nodded, without interrupting her ritual chant. The ancient words flowed from her lips like water from a spring, each syllable charged with the power of generations of protectors. The lunar crystal began to pulse more forcefully, and suddenly a series of ethereal images began to manifest in the air around them. Translucent figures of ancient wolves, each glowing with its own light, emerging from the walls of the sanctuary as if they had always been there waiting for this moment. "The guardians of all generations," Isabella explained between verses of the ritual. "They have come to witness the renewal of the pact." At that moment, a new figure appeared among the luminous shadows. A young woman, her form as ethereal as that of the spectral wolves, but unmistakable. "Alexandra!" Emily gasped, recognizing Luna's mother. Alexandra's figure smiled, approaching her daughter. Although she couldn't touch her physically, her presence enveloped the baby like an embrace of pure light. Luna let out a laugh of joy, instinctively recognizing her mother. "The circle must be completed now," Isabella said urgently. "Emily, extend your hand towards the crystal. The blood of the Morgans and the Valdez must unite in this sacred moment." Emily obeyed, holding Luna with one arm while extending her free hand towards the floating crystal. Luna's medallion shone with blinding intensity, and suddenly a ray of pure light connected the crystal, the medallion, and the hearts of all present. At that precise instant, the intruders managed to break through the last barrier. Hurried footsteps resonated on the spiral staircase, but before they could reach the inner sanctuary, something extraordinary happened. The spectral wolves fully materialized, their ethereal forms becoming solid for a brief moment. Dozens of ancestral guardians blocked the passage, their eyes shining with the same light as the lunar crystal. Isabella's voice rose in a final verse of the ritual, and the lunar crystal emitted a pulse of energy that expanded like a wave throughout the underground structure. The intruders were pushed back by the force of the ancient energy as the pact was sealed once more. "It is done," Isabella whispered as the light began to dim. "The pact has been renewed." Alexandra's ethereal figure approached her daughter one last time, her eyes full of love and promise. "I will return," she whispered, her voice like a distant echo. "When the time is right and the danger has passed, I will come back for you, my little Luna." The lunar crystal began to descend gently until it was suspended at Emily's chest height. Isabella approached with the open book of the Guardians. The crystal must be protected until Luna reaches the appropriate age to claim her full inheritance. "Emily, as part of the ancient blood, you are now its designated guardian." The spectral wolves began to fade one by one, returning to their ethereal state, but leaving behind a sense of protective presence that seemed to permeate every stone of the sanctuary. Only the two original guardian wolves remained solid, their eyes shining with ancestral wisdom. Jake and Robert descended the stairs, confirming that the intruders had retreated, apparently disoriented by the energy of the ritual. Martha repeatedly crossed herself, murmuring prayers of gratitude. As the group stood there, catching their breath and processing the incredible events they had just witnessed, they realized that this was not an end, but a new beginning. The ancient pact had been renewed, and with it a new chapter in the Valdez legacy had begun, with Emily and Luna at its center. The lunar crystal pulsed softly, a reminder of the power and responsibility they now carried. As dawn approached, they knew that their lives would never be the same, and that the adventures and challenges ahead would test not only their courage, but also the strength of the bonds they had forged this night. Emily looked down at Luna, who was now peacefully asleep in her arms, the medallion around her neck glowing faintly. She knew that their journey was just beginning, and that the secrets of the Valdez family and the Guardians would continue to unfold in the years to come. With a nod from Isabella, the group began to ascend the stairs, leaving the inner sanctuary behind, but carrying its magic with them. As they emerged into the first light of dawn, they were greeted by the sight of the guardian wolves standing proudly at the entrance of the mansion, a silent promise of protection and guidance for the days ahead. The sun rose over the horizon, marking the beginning of a new era for the Valdez legacy, with Emily, Luna, and their newfound family at its heart.